that going to be?
I'm Cyril Vanier in Doha. In one of the most thrilling matches of the Qatar World Cup, Croatia beat Japan on penalties to secure a place in the quarterfinals. Ecstatic fans celebrated their team's victory. One high-profile supporter at Al Janoub Stadium was none other than Prime Minister Andrej Plenkovic. Well, we caught up with him just before that match to discuss the national side's performance in the tournament, as well as some of the latest developments back home, including Croatia's upcoming accession to the Schengen area and adopting the euro as its official currency. From relations in the Balkans regions to the European Union, the war in Ukraine, and NATO, Prime Minister Andrej Plenkovic talks to Al Jazeera. Prime Minister Andrej Plenkovic, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for talking to Al Jazeera.
Thank you for the invitation.
You're here briefly for the World Cup, of course, because Croatia are playing. Now, full disclosure, by the time this conversation airs, Croatia will have played against Japan. We'll know the result of the game, but as you and I speak, we don't know. So I don't know whether to congratulate you on a victory for the Vetreni that may or may not happen in a few hours, or whether you have a national tragedy on your hands.
Well, I was just before our interview with our players, with our team, with our trainer. They're in a good mood, very enthusiastic. The team is playing well. Croatia came second in the last World Cup in Russia, and the fact that we have, for another time, passed the group round and we are now in the elimination phase gives us confidence that the players will play well. So I wish them luck, and the entire Croatia and the Croatian people across the world have huge expectations and are looking for a further step in this tournament.
All right, let's talk about politics. As we speak, Western nations have decided a price cap on Russian oil at $60 a barrel. Now, this is intended to limit Russia's ability to finance its war against Ukraine. But the Ukrainian president, Volodymyr Zelensky, says this is weak. That's his word, weak. He says the price should have been half that. What do you think?
Well, first of all, I think that the entire international community has demonstrated tremendous, unprecedented solidarity and support to Ukraine. I, as a leader of the Croatian government, our parliament, the people, we were very clear on condemning Russian aggression against Ukraine, for extending full support to Ukraine, whether it was diplomatic, political, economic, technical, financial, humanitarian, military. And of course, the same did the international community. The number of, for instance, the European Union has passed, the number of restrictive measure packages of sanctions was also unprecedented in terms of volume, the scope. And I think this limitation to $60 was a wider effort, came from G7, came from the biggest players in the world. And I think it has, of course, done the control of the income for the Russian export of oil. And from that perspective, if you are the Ukrainian president, everything is too much. If you look at the needs of the world, I think it is a very, very serious price cap, which will have an impact.
But the price cap was agreed on Friday. Again, as a reminder, it's $60 a barrel. And the market price of Russian oil on Friday, close of business on Friday, was $67 a barrel. In other words, the price cap was actually pretty close to what market rate already was. So there wasn't that much of a difference. So does it really limit Russia's ability to finance its war on Ukraine?
Well, I think it will have an impact because we have seen over the past year how the prices went up. I mean, at the end of the day, what were the major ramifications for the rest of the world of Russia's aggressions against Ukraine? This was the energy crisis, the food crisis, the inflationary pressure. We all had to do on national level a number of interventions as governments in order to keep the prices of electricity under control, prices of gas, prices of gasoline, of super, of diesel, of all of the possible variants. Even my government, while I'm here in Qatar, had a telephone session lowering the prices of gasoline and diesel in Croatia. So I think all of us were doing the maximum efforts to limit it globally and then intervene nationally as much as we can, and also to basically limit and control the income that finances the war. That is the idea.
As far as gas is concerned, that was oil. But as far as gas is concerned, European countries have tried very hard to limit their dependence on Russian gas. Croatia is actually, you could say, ahead of the game on this because you have made a gamble that is paying off on LNG, liquefied natural gas. Where are you now getting your gas from?
Yeah, well, it was done during my first mandate. I'm now in the 7th year of my tenure as Croatia's Prime Minister, but I ended the sort of 40 years long debate of the Croatian energy community, whether we need or whether we don't need the LNG terminal. So we decided, yes, we need it. We got co-financing from the European Union. The rest was done by the Croatian government, and a small portion was paid by our gas company and our electro-energetic company. And now we have a terminal with 2.9 billion cubic meters on the island of Krk, making Croatia a regional energy hub. What I'm doing now is actually investing into the extension of the capacities of this LNG terminal to 6.1 BCMs, and that opens up the possibility for Bosnia and Herzegovina, for Slovenia, for Hungary, even for Austria. There is an interest from Austria and Germany to actually build up new pipelines and use the Croatia's island of Krk terminals for wider usage for this part of Europe of the LNG. The LNG gas has basically now been predominant in Croatia. It is, I think, over 70% now.
But where is it coming from? Who's supplying it?
Oh, from various countries. It's coming from everywhere. It's coming from Algeria, it's coming from Qatar, it's coming from the United States.
The United States, your biggest supplier, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, one of them. It's coming from everywhere. It's a market-based exercise. So our companies who are ordering the LNG ships, they look at the prices, which are the most convenient, and then they buy.
Are you concerned, as one of the European countries that is looking for other suppliers, that you might be replacing over-reliance on Russian gas with over-reliance on another country?
So far, it has been pretty diversified in terms of supply of gas. I don't think we are going from one dependency to another. Obviously, with the structure of the gas pipelines in Europe, it was normal that everybody was consuming Russian gas coming through Ukraine. But now what we have seen the data. It comes from Norway, it comes from Algeria, it comes from Qatar, it comes from Azerbaijan, it comes from the United States. So it's a very much diversified supply at this stage, not depending on one single source.
Let's talk about the war in Ukraine. How do you see it ending?
My feeling is that the major logical, legitimate position of the Ukrainian government is to work for the territorial integrity and the liberation of the occupied territories at the moment. This is what they're doing. I think they have been really heroic in terms of resistance.
That's the European line, respectfully. But how do you see it actually ending?
Well, it will end with some sort of a peace conference sooner or later. This is how
negotiations?
Negotiations, of course, but the point is to attain back the territory that is currently occupied. I think the conceding of the territorial concessions means basically the acknowledgement of the annihilation of the international law. Actually, I don't see the end of the actually military operations now. This is highly unlikely. What we have seen the advances of the Ukrainian forces in regaining the temporarily occupied territory, which was saluted by everyone. Ukraine has been in the position that many countries delivered military assistance and a serious military assistance. So once the blitzkrieg didn't function or didn't work in February, now I think Ukrainian military capabilities have been consolidated. It's very difficult to lose more land in the sense that we have witnessed over the first months of the war, and now they are more stronger. So combination of strength in terms of military capabilities and also diplomatic and international efforts in mediation is what will happen in the months ahead.
Should NATO countries, of which Croatia is one, be supplying more military aid to Ukraine?
Well, I think everybody has been very consistent. We have passed at the government to the level several decisions in providing military assistance to Ukraine.
But they want more?
Well, the war is an exercise that consumes a lot of military equipment, a lot of ammunition, so this is a process which will last, and I don't think that they can produce themselves everything that they need, given the strength and the magnitude of the adversary.
But Ukraine has several times requested defense systems, weapon systems, types of missiles that would give them a more decisive military edge, and NATO countries have been reluctant to go all the way in providing all the types of weapons that Ukraine has requested.
Well, I have to admit I don't remember of any similar situation in recent years where we have seen so much military assistance in such a short span of time. If I compare Croatia 30 years ago, we were also a victim of aggression. It was the greatest Serbian Milosevic's policy, Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Kosovo, etc. We were not only in the position that we couldn't buy anything legally, we had United Nations arms embargo. So everything that Croatia received at the time was basically smuggled and paid extra with higher prices than normally. Here, you have countries who are actually donating military equipment to Ukraine to the extent which I don't remember ever happened in recent decades, actually. So, of course, they need more, but there are different countries who can give and provide different equipment.
What lesson do you think perhaps Western countries, whether it's NATO countries, EU countries, can learn from the Croatian example?
Well, we managed to end our situation in terms of the aggression against Croatia with a unique, successful operation of the United Nations. So part of our occupied territories were liberated in '95 with military police operation, but the remaining part was actually reintegrated into the Croatian legal and constitutional system through the United Nations peacekeeping missions, which was called Transitional Administration in Eastern Slavonia. And without one single bullet being fired, with one single person having died, this area of Croatia was reintegrated into our constitutional system.
Ukraine wants to join both NATO and the European Union. Croatia is a member of both. It is the most recent, the youngest member of the European Union. Do you think Ukraine should be allowed into those two clubs?
Yeah. When it comes to European Union, I was a fervent supporter of granting the candidate status to Ukraine at European Council in June. I think we did the right thing. Ukraine has been doing for years a lot of efforts in fulfilling the criteria for moving towards the candidate status. This was finally granted in June. And this is an incentive for the Ukrainian government, for the Ukrainian people to work more. Once you obtain a candidate status, it does not necessarily mean that the membership will follow tomorrow. It is just the beginning of a structured, very serious, demanding process of adapting your own legal system, your economic system, your institutions, your ability to implement the so-called acquis communautaire, which is the bulk of the EU legislation. It will take years. When it comes to NATO, where we remain as an alliance today, is basically to stick to the language of keeping the open door policy, but I don't think that the conditions are ripe yet that there would be such a decision in the immediate future.
Is there hypocrisy perhaps on the part of NATO leaders and NATO countries? 14 years ago, NATO accepted and approved Ukraine and gave Ukraine a perspective that maybe it would be able to join. And 14 years on, when you ask NATO leaders, they're equivocal about
From today's perspective, perhaps it was a missed opportunity back in 2008. That was the Bucharest summit. This is when the decision on Croatia's accession to NATO was taken. For Ukraine and Georgia, it was put aside. What is important with NATO membership, and I will always remember the visit of, at the time, President of the United States, who came to Croatia just in front of the government and parliament building in 2008 on his way back from Bucharest. He says, now that you're members of NATO, no one will ever take your freedom away. And this is the strength of the collective defense of the military alliance and the Article 5 of the Washington Treaty. So from that respect, being in a way, means being protected. It's unlikely
should Ukraine have been brought in years ago?
Yeah, if that decision has been done by the leaders at the time, I think it would have changed things. But it was always a matter of how far you will go against, or how far you will go in at the time you will remember the near abroad of Russia.
If I look at your neighbor, Serbia, Western European countries in particular are wary of the role that Serbia is playing in terms of its foreign policy, because it has not aligned its foreign policy with the European Union. It has not taken sides in the Russia-Ukraine war. And you have those Europeans who fear that Serbia could be something of a Trojan horse on the European continent for Russian interests. Your thoughts on that?
Well, we have said many times, I have said it publicly and openly, I think for Serbia the moment is basically to choose. You can't sit on two chairs at the same time. We understand and know the historical links and connections and alliances that they have with Moscow. This is not a secret, and we can respect that. But if your ambition is the genuine one and you're really committed to join the European Union, then in this process you are supposed to align your foreign policy positions with the general line of the European Union. What we have seen when it comes to the EU policy on Russia during only this year, Serbia didn't align.
They are not aligning.
They are not aligning. And this is going to be one of the messages in the declaration that we shall be adopting between the European Union and the Western Balkans, that the EU leaders invite the leaders of the region to align their common foreign and security policy positions with the EU. And this is an opportunity for Serbia to be more articulate and more assertive and not trying to balance. Because here, I wouldn't say it's black and white, but you can't be really both, on both sides.
At the moment, is Serbia a suitable candidate for accession to the European Union?
Well, Serbia is having a candidate status
they have
for
candidate
years.
Status,
and
but are they a suitable candidate?
They are negotiating accession. It is a process that will take time. If they continue like this, their process will be slower. It's very clear. Not only because of Croatia, but it's a general opinion among many, many member states.
If I look at all your neighbors, region-wide, the Balkans, you have spoken out in favor of all those countries joining the European Union. Why?
Well, we feel that the entire area of Western Balkans, and these are 6 countries, it's Serbia, it's Bosnia and Herzegovina, Montenegro, Kosovo, North Macedonia and Albania, they are surrounded by the EU members. They have nowhere else to go. You have Greece, Bulgaria, Romania, Hungary, Croatia. So they're basically like the inner courtyard of the European Union, and are deeply convinced that it is good for the countries, good for the European Union, if these countries attain the adequate legal, first of all, standards, economic standards, social standards, build strong institutions, fight against corruption, cooperate with each other, address the remaining bilateral issues which are there in the air, and basically join the club. The longer they remain out of the club, we shall see more impact in the region by the non-EU actors, and that's so clear.
But when you go to the European summits, you represent Croatia there. There are 26 other voices in the room. You know how difficult it can be to reach consensus and reach decisions. You want to add more voices to that conversation.
Well, you mean whether the EU that is too big can function?
Correct.
Well, but this is a perennial debate of deepening and widening.
And you're on the side of widening.
Well, as someone who joined as 27, I would be a hypocrite if I would say, no, that's enough, we'll keep everybody else out. I don't think this is normal. What we want is that those countries who want to join pass the very severe path of fulfilling the criteria just as we did, and they join, because it's good for the European stability, it's good for the European cohesion. At the end of the day, all countries combined are now representing, in terms of population, less than the former Yugoslavia had 30 years ago. So in terms of numbers of population, it's not a lot. In terms of decision-making, I understand the concerns of the founding members, of the big members, of the contribution to the EU budget. I fully understand that, but at the end of the day, we need to have a structured process. In that respect, I very much commend the fact that we have launched in Prague 2 months ago the European Political Community as a new format where we shall meet regularly in a wider forum so that we can actually create bonds between those who are in the club and those who are yet to become or would like to join. And therefore, our position was, for all of our neighbors, you're welcome. Please fulfill the criteria. We are supporting you.
As far as your neighbor Bosnia is concerned, Croatia is sometimes, I might say regularly, accused of interfering in their politics. Your reaction to that?
Well, I wouldn't say that. I would say that Croatia and Bosnia and Herzegovina are 2 most substantially linked countries in the region. When you look at the map, you see that Croatia literally surrounds the northern border and, let's say, southern border of Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Still, they're 2 separate countries, sovereign countries.
Of course, they are 2. This is my first point. This is our strategically most important neighbor because of the Croats who live there. They are a constituent people. You know that Bosnia and Herzegovina is 1 country, 2 entities, 3 constituent peoples, Croats, Bosniaks and Serbs and others, of course. And we would like them to go as fast as they can, and we help them towards the European Union. I'm suggesting that Bosnia and Herzegovina also be granted a candidate status, if possible already now at the European Council next week in Brussels. And we are not interfering. We are just fulfilling our constitutional task of taking care of the Croats who live in other countries. And where else should we be more active? You know, it's unlikely people will ask us to solve a problem in Southeast Asia. They will ask us what we think in our immediate neighborhood.
Earlier this year, the Croatian president threatened to block the accession bid to NATO by Finland and Sweden if the electoral law in Bosnia wasn't changed. I mean, I think that qualifies as potentially interference?
Yeah, but I think you are aware that my government and I personally was very much against that position of the president. And eventually what happened, the Croatian parliament ratified the accession treaty of Sweden to NATO, of Finland to NATO, with 125 and 124 votes in favor respectively, with I think only 3 MPs voting against. So the majority of the Croatian political body of political parties was very much in favor. I don't think that the blackmailing of that nature can do any good. I think we did, from a principal point of view, a helping hand to Finland and Sweden because they felt unsecure after the decades of neutral policy of both countries, now with what they have seen in Ukraine, which is their wider neighborhood. Plus, we have managed that in Bosnia and Herzegovina, the High Representative, Mr. Schmidt, has passed, using his bond powers, some modifications of the Constitution of the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina and electoral law, which has, in a way, saved and strengthened the position of the Croats. So, with diplomatic and political work that we did as a government, we attained our objectives without stopping or blackmailing anyone. So, let's say that we were making the right choices in that respect.
Croatia is joining the euro in January.
Indeed.
Something towards which you have worked very hard personally. Do you still want the euro?
Of course. When I became the Prime Minister, and that was back in 2016, I said, okay, we've been in the EU at the time for 3 years. Now it's the moment to start the hard work to enter into 2 deeper EU integrations. One was the Eurozone, the other one was the Schengen area. So we worked hard. We made a national strategy to adopt the euro, to change the Croatian kuna into euro, fulfilled all the criteria. We joined the exchange rate mechanism too and the banking union back in 2020 in July. We had a follow-up action plan, which we also delivered. Commission was very good in terms of our assessment. Eurogroup was good. Bringing the euro to Croatia is going to mean, in a most simple things, two elements. One, Croatia will be better protected in the context of the global crisis and less exposed than we would have been if we were outside of the euro. So we are, by the way, a very much euroized country. Most of our savings, most of our credits, most of our tourists, most of our trade exchange is already happening with the euro states. So it's going to be a relatively easy transition. The little bit delicate is the fact that this is happening in the times of the crisis caused by the Russia's aggression against Ukraine and the inflationary pressures. But nonetheless, we are managing well. The other deeper integration is Schengen, and we expect the decision this Thursday, which is the free movement, and thus Croatia becoming 20th member of the euro and the 23rd member of Schengen area for us is being fully with 2 legs strong in the core of the European process. For me, it's a great achievement as a Prime Minister in the middle of my second mandate.
Enjoying the full benefit package of the European Union.
Indeed.
One last thing before I let you go. Back to football, if you will, just for a second. Back to football. If Croatia, let's just take Croatia out of the equation, who do you see going all the way?
Well,
I'll take Croatia out of the equation for a second. Otherwise, I know the answer.
I can't. Honestly, I can't.
Okay, all right. You're sitting on the fence on that one.
Thank you.
Prime Minister Andrej Plenkovic, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Jazeera.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.